Hi, welcome back to Jen's Movies of the Week. Sorry that it's a little later this week. I have long COVID, as some of you may know, so my energy levels sometimes fluctuate, and I had a couple days where I was feeling too tired to record. But I'm back, and I saw so many movies last week. It's been actually hard to figure out what to talk about, so I've put them kind of into two general categories. On the one hand, I watched some more shark movies. And on the other hand, I watched a couple of Giallo movies I'd like to talk about. So if you're interested in only one or the other topic, please remember that you can look at the timestamps at the bottom, of the screen and fast forward to what you want to hear about, or listen to the whole show. I would love that. Anyway, in addition to those two categories, I also did watch the drama this week, which was new on streaming. I have a hunch that I might be talking about that in the top first time watches of August later in the month. So I'm going to save that until then. But my short review for you is that if you're the kind of person who can handle movies with awkward or embarrassing situations, you should watch it. If you really hate that kind of movie, you should skip it. So that's my advice to you. All right, so now let's get into shark movies. So, I covered some shark movies in last week's episode. We continued watching shark movies this week. Part of that is because my husband and I are in a two-person book club with each other. And right now we were reading Jaws by Peter Benchley. We just finished that. I'd already read Jaws, but I wanted to share it with Lee, my husband, because we're both big fans of the movies and I wanted him to also see how many changes got made between the book and the movie. It's a really interesting case of adaptation where they really took so much out and altered the story so much, but yet it still somehow captures some essential things about the book. So if you're really interested in the process of adaptation, reading Jaws and then watching Jaws is something I really recommend to you. Um, and just last night, we actually watched the Jaws at 50 documentary, which we streamed. I don't know if it was Hulu or Disney Plus, but it was on one of those. We streamed Jaws at 50, a documentary, and learned a few more facts about the making of Jaws. I was able to finally learn about how the USS Indianapolis speech came about. And it was really a collaborative effort among several people. So that's really interesting too. So I recommend checking out that Jaws at 50 documentary if you want to learn more about the making of Jaws. I recommend watching Jaws from 1975 at any time if you never have. I find it almost impossible to believe that anyone listening to this has never seen Jaws, but if you haven't, turn this off. Go watch Jaws right now. Anyway, so we also rewatched Jaws this week for the umpteenth time. And then a couple other shark movies we watched. So two of them I watched with my husband, and those were the bad ones. It often works out that way somehow. And then one I watched on my own, which was really good. So first of all, I'm going to get the bad ones out of the way. So on Tubi right now are a couple of Italian Jaws ripoffs that I had heard about before because my friends at the Get Me Another podcast covered them both on their show. And if you do happen to watch these movies, I recommend going and listening to my friends' podcast because honestly, we had way more fun listening to their podcast talking about these movies than we did watching the movies themselves. So one of them is called The Last Shark, and that one is from, I believe, 1981. Yes, 1981. And The Last Shark is kind of a Jaws ripoff. It goes through a lot of the same story beats, and it's obviously trying to be Jaws. But it has some competent cinematography and some competent acting, but it's not great. It's like, I don't know. It's only worth watching if you're into shark movies and you want to be a completist, or if you enjoy B movies. Okay, it's not. It doesn't really get bad enough to be super funny. It's a little bit funny at times, but it's okay. But the real interesting case here is Cruel Jaws. So Cruel Jaws was made in 1995, also an Italian film. And what Cruel Jaws does, which is incredibly audacious, okay, in a bad way, is it rips off most of its footage from The Last Shark, the one I just talked about, the other ripoff of Jaws. So we ended up watching Cruel Jaws first, weirdly enough. So we saw a lot of The Last Shark before we watched The Last Shark because Cruel Jaws is literally taking most of their action scenes and just plunking them down into its movie. Yeah, and and it's robbing footage from all over the place too, not just the Last Shark, but all over the place. It's almost like a montage, a pastiche of different movies. But then it has its own original footage too. Bewilderingly, there's like a Hulk Hogan impersonator type guy in it, and like there's a water park, but it's not fun like in Jaws 3. But there is a seal. Okay, the thing I like the best about this movie, and that should tell you something, is that there was a seal named Poppy, and sometimes the seal did fun things, but not enough. There really should have been more seal. It might have like edged my rating up just a little bit. Anyway, yeah, Cruel Jaws was bad. Okay, the guys on the Get Me Another podcast, they seem to think that it was like so bad it's good. They put it like in with like they compared it to like Troll 2, but in my opinion, no, no, no. Troll 2 is in a class of its own, much better, much funnier. Cruel Jaws was just like, oh, bad. Like, and like the best parts of it too, to be honest, were things they stole from the Last Shark. So I don't know, man. Like I wouldn't watch these if I were you, but if you do watch them, definitely check out my friend's podcast, which I will link in the description box. All right, so moving on from the bad shark movies, I did see another good shark movie this week, and I was really excited by this. I watched Dangerous Animals, and that was on, no, not Tubi, sorry. That was on Canopy, which is the streaming service you can get from your library. Not every library, but a lot have them. And if your library doesn't have Canopy, I would suggest talking to your librarians about maybe getting it because, like, they will, listen to requests if enough people request something. Anyway, Dangerous Animals came out last year. And I hadn't watched it at first because the trailer gave me the idea that it was going to be a lot darker and harsher and maybe a little bit more sexist than it actually turned out to be. Like the trailer really highlights the killer's POV and his narration. And the movie is not like that. I was very happy to see that. So, this is a movie that combines the shark genre and the serial killer genre. It is a serial killer who kills people by feeding them to sharks. And since I enjoyed both of these genres a lot of the time, I was like really excited to see them together. But like I said, the trailer made it look like maybe it was going to be more on the sort of terrifier end of the horror spectrum, like more like a little bit celebrating the killer or thinking, oh, he's kind of cool. I hate that shit. Okay. Like, I'm sorry. Like, the horror genre starts to feel pretty sexist to me when people start like really valorizing the killer too much. And I'm not talking like, Jason, like, I don't know. There's something different about the way most people approach Jason, and also Jason tends to kill men and women pretty equally, so it doesn't feel as targeted as at women. But there's some aspects of the horror genre which start to feel icky to me. Okay, but thankfully the trailer seem to hint that way. And then the reality of the movie is that you are more invested in the final girl in this movie named Zephyr, who is a surfer, who is a competent character, who is interesting to watch. It ends up being more like a thriller, sort of a horror movie in some ways, like because it's not so much about repeated gory kills as it is about like escaping the particular killer and this one girl's journey. I mean, there are other kills, okay? Like, so if you're a horror fan, you're not going to be totally disappointed, I don't think. But don't go in expecting it's going to be like a total slasher gore fest either. Um, so yeah, for me, this is a big recommendation. Like, this is not going to be as dark as maybe it appears to be. And it's going to have some heft to it. There's even like a little bit of a romance in the movie. I think they could have even pushed that angle a little more and made it even better, but like I was happy with what I was given. And so I thought Dangerous Animals was great. There were some nice shots of sharks as well, which was pretty cool. So yeah, if you like serial killer movies or shark movies, I would recommend Dangerous Animals. I found it on Canopy. It may be streaming other places too. All right. If you have any shark movies you'd like to recommend, please leave them in the comments. I've seen a lot, but I've certainly not seen all shark movies. So, yeah, let me know what some of your favorites are. All right. Now I'm going to talk about a couple of Giallo movies I watched this week. And first of all, for those of you who may not be familiar, I'll give a brief definition of what a Giallo is. So it's an Italian genre. Well, it's primarily associated with Italy that developed in the late 1960s, was very prominent in the 1970s, and there have been Giallo films scattered through the rest of the decades too. Now, they usually refer to sort of crime or thriller movies. The name Giallo is based on like the yellow covers that a certain kind of crime or horror paperback would have in Italy at the time. So it's a very particular name. They're usually crime or thriller. They can also have like supernatural elements like Suspiria. Dario Argento's Suspiria is considered a Giallo film. And part of that is because Argento was known for Giallo films previously, but it's also because it's very stylized. Gialli films or Giallo films tend to be stylized, have a lot of bright colors, like really interesting cinematography at times. So that's another hallmark. And a black glove, killers wearing a black glove, is another hallmark, although that's not always present either. Okay, so that's a brief description. Now, for some reason I've come to really love giallo films. Like they're almost like a comfort food for me. Even ones that aren't very good, I sometimes end up liking. Um, I don't know why. But yeah, and it's funny because I was talking in the Tarantino ranking episode about how I didn't like the objectification of women in From Dusk Till Dawn. And I was trying to figure out, why do I like Gialli so much if I don't like objectification of women? And I mean, what it came down to, I think, is that in horror and gialli, like you kind of expect a certain amount of objectification, but also like the people in the movie that are doing the objectifying are not supposed to be your heroes. Like in From Dusk Till Dawn, I was supposed to identify with George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino's character to a certain extent, and I didn't want to identify with them. Okay, that felt wrong. Or the bouncer who's like, talking about the women in that way. They were supposed to be cool, right? In a giallo film, the killers, the people who are objectifying or killing women, they're not supposed to be the hero. So I think that might be what the difference is. Plus, a giallo film often has a woman as the main character. Not always, but often. Okay, so that aside, first I'm going to tell you about one of my favorite Giallo films, which I rewatched this week, which is Torso from 1973, directed by Sergio Martino, who has kind of become my favorite Giallo director. Now, Torso is a really key film to watch, not only if you want to understand the Giallo genre, but also if you want to understand the horror genre. Okay, you frequently hear like Halloween or Black Christmas will be cited as like the first like slasher movie or whatever, but like Torso has most of the same ingredients and it was earlier. I don't know if the directors of those other films watched Torso, but certainly I wouldn't be surprised if they had. So Torso is about a number of women are being killed in a university town, and eventually the group of women get together and they decide to go to this like hillside villa in a small town and kind of away from the rest of the town, isolated. There's a lot of nudity, okay, a lot of beautiful women. Sergio Martino movies always have beautiful women, and the ladies, they are not super well developed characters, but they are people I liked. And the main character, the person, the final girl who ends up being the final girl, is definitely given a little more to do, and she's a little more of a characterization there. The real reason that most people recommend this movie is for the last 30 minutes, though. And I'm not going to spoil what the last 30 minutes are, but I will say that the last 30 minutes of this movie are one of the most tense, electrifying, terrifying segments of any horror movie you will ever see. Okay, I promise you, you need to watch it. Okay, and the beginning part is not bad either. It has a lot of really interesting visuals. Like there's a few kill scenes that are filmed really like with kind of an atmosphere that you don't see in your standard paint by number slasher film. So please check Torso out if you can handle blood, gore, horror. Okay, there's not too much blood and gore, but it's definitely horror. So it's, if you're not into the horror genre, then forget it. There is like the only giallo I would really recommend to somebody who can't do much horror would be Seven Notes in Black or The Psychic. I mean, there might be some others too, but that's the one that comes to mind. And that is like a beginner giallo movie. Okay, if you haven't watched the genre, if you're not too into anything hardcore. Okay, moving on. I also watched another Sergio Martino movie this week that was new to me. I watched The Case of the Scorpion's Tail, and that's from 1971. And I actually had to find that one on YouTube. I couldn't find it streaming anywhere, but somebody had uploaded it to YouTube. And The Case of the Scorpion's Tail, it was a very well done movie. It didn't have as many of the giallo hallmarks as some of the others. Like it wasn't quite as stylized in certain respects, but I found it to be like a solid giallo, more on the whodunit end of the spectrum. It was more about figuring out who was a murderer, and it was a very like convoluted plot too, by the way. Okay, like, but I got to the end and I was like, did this all really fit together? I was like that meme of the lady doing the calculations in her head. But I found it to be pretty solid. It had some really cool location shots as well in Greece. And beautiful women as always. Sergio Martino will always have beautiful women in his films. And so I found that one also to be worth watching. I'm not going to go too much more in depth in it right now because I want to get to finally the last Giallo I watched this week, which is The Sister of Ursula from 1978. And this one was directed by Enzo Milioni. I think it's the first movie I ever saw directed by him. Now, the Sister of Ursula is way different than other Gialli I have seen. Okay, 78, so it was a little later in the game comparatively, but also like it is way more on the softcore porn end of Giallo. Okay, like really, I probably would be classified as a softcore porn because like there's a lot of nudity, a lot of like sex scenes that seem almost like they might not be simulated in some cases. Um, I think, like, at first it kind of adds an interesting spice to the film. In the end, I think it kind of bogs the movie down, though. But what this movie does have going for it, in addition to if you like the softcore porn aspect, what this movie has going for it is that it's really beautiful to look at. Like, the production design, the locations, the art direction, the use of color in the cinematography are all gorgeous. I feel like it's a little bit more emphasized at the beginning of the film. I don't know whether at the end of the film I'd just gotten used to it or if their budget had run out and they just started getting through scenes. Whatever the case, though, I found the beginning a little bit more enjoyable than the end. But the lead actress, and I didn't write her name down, I feel bad about that. But the person who plays the title character of Ursula, though, is also really giving it her all in the performance department. Okay, she's playing a really kind of complex character, and she does a great job. Um, yeah, I would definitely recommend this. If you're a Giallo fan and you haven't seen The Sister of Ursula yet, it's on Tubi right now. Super recommend you watch it because it's just a different flavor of Giallo. Beautiful to look at, interesting plot, and it's going to give you a little something different. So check that one out. Okay, so I've talked about a lot this week. If you are a fan of the Giallo genre, please drop your favorites in the comments because I am collecting more and more. I have a list called Jen's Gialli on Letterboxd, which I'll also put in the description box where you can see what I've already seen. Yeah, but I'm a fan of the genre. I'm trying to sort of collect all of them that I can. And if you have any shark movies you want to talk about or any movies you want to talk about, please leave a comment. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps to get some visibility for the channel. And also feel free to subscribe to my other channel, Every Romcom Podcast, where you can find my podcast, Every Romcom, which has been going on for years now, which we do a lot of more research for, but is audio only. Okay. So thanks everybody for listening and have a great week.